So NDP MP Charlie Angus is finding himself in a bit of hot water with a Jewish organization called Brith Canada. Now, they accused him of basically promoting, and they say, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories for sharing an article from The Guardian in the UK. The article was entitled, "Palestinians Excluded from COVID Vaccines and Jabs Go to Settlers." Now, I used to actually work for B'nai Brith. I haven't worked there in a number of years. I have nothing to do with the organization or with this statement. But in full transparency, I thought that was important to say. And I wanted to make this video just to sort of clarify what is going on in that particular region and what are the couple of things that are wrong with Mr. Angus's statement, because there are a couple of things that are actually critically wrong that most Canadians do not necessarily know. Now, I'll start off with the first part, and that's the title of the article he shared, which basically says Palestinians excluded again from COVID vaccines and jabs go to settlers. So, important to understand what is a settler, what is a Palestinian, what is an Israeli Arab, what are all these things. Now, if you look at the map of Gaza and the West Bank and Israel, it's one of the more popular type of maps you would get out there. That border between Israel and the West Bank, often that border is referred to as the 1967 border. That's actually the 1948 border. That is basically the armistice line where the war in 1948 stopped. So it's called the Green Line again because the story is that one of the people whipped out a green pen to sort of demark that line, the ceasefire line. And that is what is known as the 1967 borders. That is prior to the 1967 war, the so-called Six-Day War. Now, after that war, Israel took control of Gaza and what is known as the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria. It's called the West Bank because it's the West Bank of the Jordan River from the country of Jordan, so if they ever wondered why that is. Now, there are two types of people who would be living there. There would be Palestinians and settlers, Israeli settlers. Now, those terms are very loaded, but Palestinians themselves, you could be a Palestinian and live in Israel proper and have Israeli citizenship, or you could be a Palestinian who lives under Palestinian Authority rule, and that would be in the West Bank. And so you are not a citizen of Israel if you live in the West Bank and are under Palestinian Authority rule, but you are a citizen of Israel, and you would get the vaccine from the Israeli government if you lived inside Israel proper. Now, settlers are Israelis, usually Jews, who want to move to Judea and Samaria, which is the spiritual and ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. These are cities from the Bible where events in the Bible took place, important to Judaism, to Christianity. So it's not just, kind of random places out there that Israel, captured from another country in a war, and the areas are disputed as opposed to necessarily occupied. And we might get into that in another video, again, depending on what people want. So let me know in the comments if you want me to make a more explainer type video on the Middle East, but I'm trying to keep this strictly to Charlie Angus's statements because that's important to us here in Canada. All right, so that covers in a basic nutshell maybe Palestinians, Israeli Arab settlers. Now, what is the other issue in Charlie Angus's statement, and why I think the organization might have accused him of promoting so-called anti-Semitic conspiracy theories? That is because later on in the statement, he talks about the fact that the Israeli government carefully controls who gets in and what is allowed into the Palestinian territory. All right, so the problem is that this type of language makes it sound like Israel is solely responsible for everything that goes on into Gaza and even possibly the West Bank. But anyone who looks at a map can see that Gaza does not just border Israel, it actually borders another country, and that country is Egypt. Egypt also has a blockade on Gaza for the very same reason that Israel does, and that is because the government in Gaza is Hamas, which is listed as a terror organization in Canada, as well as a number of other places. So for Charlie Angus to really just focus on criticizing Israel or talk about, criticism of Canadian policy toward Israel because of their blockade of Gaza, there's almost never, and I mean almost never, I've almost never, maybe once or twice in my life, seen people discuss the fact that Egypt has a very similar, if not tougher, blockade against Gaza. That is again because the government is a terrorist organization and they have ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and to Iran, both of which Egypt is not happy about, and so they maintain a very strict blockade on the Gaza Strip as well. Now, if you want to talk about, things that are allowed or not allowed into Gaza, then I'm going to see if we can put up links to a Twitter feed, and the hashtag, I believe, is the Gaza You Don't See. And it talks about all the really high-priced and, five-star hotels and elite things in Gaza, which you would not necessarily expect if you just listen to some of the mainstream coverage about, about the Israeli-Arab conflict and about what is happening in Gaza. So we'll put up some of those pictures and maybe some of those links as well in the comments. So, in a nutshell, I think that is the issue, and people need to know, or at the very least should keep in mind, that when you're criticizing Israel, it is obviously 100% okay to criticize the country, but there are many sort of touch points where these things tend to bleed into anti-Semitism, and that usually is around focusing on Israel as the sole cause of problems, or not discussing, in this case, the fact that Egypt also plays a role in the blockade of Gaza. Now, I'm not trying to accuse Charlie Angus of anything in particular in this video. I just wanted to clarify those particular statements. I mean, that's for, Brith Canada to address or discuss with Charlie Angus, and we'll follow this story, see if Charlie releases another statement and what that is going to happen. But again, if you do have questions about that, I would very much enjoy making a video about the Israeli-Arab conflict in the most unbiased way that I know how. We'll see. We'll see if you guys are interested in that. Please let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. It's really great. You get to stay up to date with all the videos from True North. There's a lot of really great content, independent Canadian content that comes out of this channel, and I would definitely recommend that you subscribe and hit that notification bell. So, once again, for True North, I'm Sam Eskenasi. I hope you enjoyed this video and got, at the very least, a little perspective on the Israeli-Arab conflict. Thank you so much for watching.